Hello, welcome to Build. We are beginning with the land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement is based on Adrian Wong of Spiderweb Show and from Dr. H. Harakuti Sharif Williams, who I met at the CUNY Racial Justice and Performance Conference. This will be shared by many voices. Thank you for helping us begin.
We acknowledge that settler colonizers and imperialists
We are beginning with the land acknowledgement.
from Europe took and unceded the land on which we gather from the peoples who would steward it for generations. The land has been and continues to be occupied and held by force. We acknowledge that we are contributing to that legacy now.
We acknowledge that settler colonizers and slavers from Europe used stolen and enforced labor of African peoples to subsequently develop the land. We honor the lives of all who endured and continue to endure in the face of settler colonialism and white supremacy.
Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within technological structures, including the equipment and high-speed internet, which are not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous and marginalized people worldwide.
We invite you to join us in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation and decolonization.
Thank you all so much for helping us to begin Build from Here. I now pass the microphone to the artistic director of FoolsFURY, Debórah Eliezer.
Hey everyone, thank you, Claudia. So great to see everybody in the house. The moment has finally arrived. I'm Debórah Eliezer, the artistic director of FoolsFURY, and we are just so glad you are here. Please put your land acknowledgement in the chat if you wish as you are going. Where are you calling in from? Place matters, and for a lot of us, we are displaced and coming from places of isolation or all over the world, really. So take the land inside you and also recognize the land you are on. Much appreciation. Thank you to our voicers and for our land acknowledgement. And great. Claudia, I'm going to pass it back to you. Do we want to do our video?
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. So we have all experienced great losses this year, and we wanted to begin by acknowledging where we are starting from. Big thanks to Adam, to Alicia, to the Network of Ensemble Theaters, and gigantic thank yous to everyone who offered photos, voice, story to create this document. I'll probably do some more acknowledgements after we are done experiencing our in memoriam video.
George Ongom used his radio show on Radio Lyra in northern Uganda to broadcast the stories of child soldiers and sex slaves abducted from their villages as children by Joseph Konye's Lord's Resistance Army. These people had escaped and come home, and those stories and songs and poems proved so powerful that the LRA began to dissolve as thousands deserted. The LRA sent their army to kill George and destroy Radio Lyra. They didn't succeed. George demonstrated the power of story to bring real change. Okweni George Ongom, I remember you.
Corey Fisher was a great inspiration to me, and one of the reasons I became a theater artist. He wasn't learning lines in plays and taking on characters that he didn't deeply relate to. Rather, he was creating theater with his whole person. He was devising and creating stories in collaboration with his ensemble and exploring deeply the things and questions that he was interested in the world, always rich with value, rich with questions, and making the world a better and more interesting place.
Diane Rodriguez said, "All are striving for connection, beauty, calm, and refinement in a world where there is fear, confusion, ugliness, acts of terror, inequality, violence, and hate. All are on their path to art. They find that their better selves have the power to heal a broken spirit, to heal so many of us who have lost our way."
We lost Mary Overly earlier this year. Mary was an enormously influential mentor to the FoolsFURY family, company, and to countless other theater makers and dance makers around the world. Her loss is enormous. What she brought us all was wonderful. Her spirit will live on. Her incredible, strange, and convoluted mind will live on in the work that gets made in this century and beyond. Mary, we miss you.
What can I say about Chadwick Aharoon, son of the Griots Bozeman? He has been a griot and a sage since the first day that I met him, which was now over 25 years ago. Always thinking of what is beyond the horizon, always existing beyond the horizon, which I think is what has made him such a beautiful and insightful artist. He always could see possibility, even when others couldn't. Chad is a great man, spirit, soul, and will continue to walk with us forever.
1.
Just take a moment and breathe. Thank you. Thank you for taking this moment to begin this correctly. Today, our focus is racial justice. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Please say hello to your community in the chat, in the Hopin platform. We also have folks who are audiencing outside from Facebook and HowlRound, so hello to you as well. Thank you, gigantic audience, for being here. And a big thank you to Adam, Astral Tehran, to Camila Forbes, to Jerry Stropnicki, to Ben Yalam. I am missing the names of all of the humans who filled out our beautiful Google form to submit names for this video. Thank you all.
Thank you to all of you.
Debórah, please, I would love it if you could begin us with some beautiful framing remarks.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's an important moment for FoolsFURY, and thank you to my team as well, holding me up. I got a few things to say, y'all. Here we go. You know, why build here from now? Why this convening? We are displaced, we're overworked, we're at the whim of a dangerous, careless government. The race reckoning as inside a pandemic crisis is making more clear that the systems we have do not serve us. The very few, they only serve the very few and further oppress most of us. We have witnessed our entire field shut down. The global pandemic revealed what we already know, that existing systems don't work. The world is in a state of dis-ease. Fire suppression is a white supremacist desire to repress and control nature, to fear that which we have made foreign and protect what is comfortable. It signifies a dissonance, a misalignment with that which is authentic, natural, organic. And rage is the logical outcome of suppression. When something or someone is suppressed, its power grows. All this chaos, climate disaster, protests, violence, bodily harm, love, joy, sorrow, heart, woe, it all has energy. And you know that. I could easily opt out. We could take a nap. We could stay silent. And yet I am constantly inspired by everyday resilience. I've watched fellow colleagues innovate, rehearse, educate, dance, rap, write plays, tell stories in the midst of this pandemic. I've witnessed the power of being in service to something greater than any individual, which for me is ensemble at its best. So guess what? Our ensemble practices have uniquely prepared us for this moment. Our experimental practices out here in the often marginalized experimental wing of the American theater has given us PhDs in wayfinding and innovation in the face of adversity. We don't only survive, we thrive. Ensemble culture workers and theater makers have long tested training that knows how to move from dissonance to attunement, from distraction to presence. We have a useful relationship with fear and discomfort. We are standing on the shoulders of years of practicing horizontal leadership, role fluidity within our organizations, recognizing the individual in the group, being in relationship with people, audiences, artists, our work, not being in relationship with at something. We are regularly interrogating our process. So thanks for showing up. I encourage you to bring all of you into this space. Your beautiful, messy, awkward self is needed right now. Your doubt, your authenticity, your wholeness, not your Facebook, IG, best moments ever self, but the person who you are right now. Let's approve of where we are. Because y'all, this is some effed up stuff sometimes. So I invite you to give yourself a compassionate pat on the back for getting this far. Woo. Together, I believe we are designing a new blueprint for ensemble theater and contribute to society in a crisis as very important second responders. The firefighters may be the first responders, but studies show we, the culture makers, are the second responders. We are coming in to build sustainable structures after the fires rage, shaping culture and modeling systems for a more inclusive, diverse way forward. Thank you for joining us. Grab your hammer and let's build from here. We're going to give some thanks out. Woo, there's your
yes, I'm ready. So let me do some quick thank yous, and then I want to get us to our keynote speaker, Kristina Wong. I am so excited to hear her. But before we get there, first, let me give a shout out to just the amazing community of partners and organizations that have been the bedrock of support that help us. Alicia Tonzik, from the executive director of the Network of Ensemble Theaters. Brad Erickson of Theater Bay Area. Brad, Dale, Kim, Jacob, and the entire TVA staff have exemplified transparent growth and allyship. We want to give a gigantic shout out to HowlRound and their partnership. Big shout out to LMDA, Nikisa, Emily, you have been rock stars, the literary managers and dramaturgs of America. We've created something completely brand new. We invented something called microturgy through this collaboration. Gigantic thank you to the 64 applicants and the 18 dramaturgs who were paired with our artists for the Art Share artists. We're super excited for that. Big thanks to TCG, Elena Cheng, Unsettling Dramaturgy, Latinx Theater Commons, Black Theater Commons, Middle Eastern North African Theater Makers Alliance, MENA, Jewish Theater Alliance, and the Arts Administrators of Color. We have a lot of amazing organizations that have been coming together and joining us for this conversation. And
I gotta interrupt you right there, my colleague.
I know you want to do a shout out to me.
I do. I have to say, at the early stages of the pandemic, we pivoted and Claudia brought it so beautifully into the digital sphere, together working, calling up justice with us. Although we've been online for years, FoolsFURY, we had no idea how much more sophisticated and challenging producing an online convening would be. Thankfully, I have an amazing guest director modeling our new position of guest director, who is both designing this staff position and doing it, and is also a transmedia expert. Y'all, Claudia exemplifies transformation in motion. She is a fierce racial justice digital innovator, uncompromising ensemble advocate, and a dear friend. Thank you, Claudia, for all your labor and love on this project, modeling and creating the new guest director position, and your ongoing support of FoolsFURY. I am so grateful to learn and lead with you. And y'all, we have an amazing staff that is working so hard. I know we want to just give a shout out to you right now. Lawrence Gonzalez, Kadar Lawrence, all of our interns, Sabina Uni, Sam Morales, all of our interns, Lindsay Barr, Suzanne McDonald, Frida Barrows, and Celeste Munoz Perez. Thank you. Our interns are the future, and our early career artists are the future of ensemble. So let's make it right for them, y'all.
So our first day is going to be the foundation is racial justice. We'll be doing some work that is outward facing for everyone to witness. And we're also going to be getting into some rooms and doing some work together. We're going to be in the lab building some new things. We're using ensemble theater practice as a blueprint for the new foundation of what it is we're doing. On day 2, we have new models in a new era, economic justice. How are we innovating these new models of working together and being more equitable? How are we looking at this not-for-profit industrial complex and how is it serving us? How can we find new ways and new structures to do this better? We're also going to be having some amazing art shares. I'm going to hold some of the amazing details we have about the art shares for later, but I do want to talk about our access needs and tech needs real quick before we get to our keynote speaker. So if you need any access needs or tech needs, please make a note in the chat. We have got house staff manning all of the chats in all of the various areas. So if you have any accessibility issues, please let us know and we will be serving those as much as possible. We're also incredibly grateful to have partnered with Access to have a sign interpreter, and we're very pleased to be able to have that as well. If it is possible, please support this work. There's going to be a link that's put into the chat just to continue the support of this work. And that is how we are able to continue collaborating with brilliant folks like Kadar Lawrence and Celeste Munoz Perez and everyone else. And now it is my great pleasure to begin the introduction of Kristina Wong. Now, Kristina Wong, I have known Kristina Wong personally as an artist for, I don't want to tell our ages, but it's been a couple decades. She's a brilliant artist. She has always done work that was brave, personal, fierce, that spoke to deep truths for the entire audience, that spoke about things that were taboo and necessary to speak about and explore. As she continued in her work, she began working internationally. The album that she cut in Africa is pretty amazing. And her work spans both physical sewing work. Her work is civic engagement, and her work is also brilliantly hilarious. I highly recommend you visit her website. So our guest speaker, she is performance artist, comedian, writer. She was born and raised in the Bay Area. She currently resides in Los Angeles, where she is serving as the elected representative of Wilshire Center, Koreatown, Sub-District 5 Neighborhood Council. She is a frequent guest on the late night talk shows on Comedy Central and FX, and as an actor on film and television. She has earned praise for her off-color humor and the ways race plays out in America today. And she also has been involved in a magnificent movement in creating masks for people with her Auntie Sewing Squad. It is my deep, deep pleasure to be welcoming Kristina Wong to our stage. But before I do that, I do want to make sure I am giving enough room and space to cover all of the pieces of this. So Debórah, if you do want to take a moment to let the audience know a little bit about this great work we did with the literary and with LMDA and the microturgy, that would be great. Please go for it.
Absolutely. We have a long-standing relationship with LMDA, the Literary Managers and Dramaturgs of the Americas. And so when we pivoted to build online, Nikisa and I said, let's go global, which was amazing because we have dramaturgs working with our art share participants, matching, just like we do in the Fury Factory. But then we called it microturgy because it's a really small, tiny relationship that we've built. And I know already I'm hearing from some of the artists that they are going to continue to work and they feel like they have found new friends in the theater. For FoolsFURY, our journey of inquiry has really been about what is the role of dramaturgy in devising and the model of ensemble theater. So we're just so grateful for LMDA. We're so grateful for the hard work that all the dramaturgs have been doing to quickly create these word clouds and these beautiful calling cards that are ways for you to see, to get to know more dramaturgs. Y'all, everybody, we had 64 applicants for 18 positions. What does that say, ensemble field? That says that dramaturgy is knocking on our door. You know, this is alive and well and something we need to call more attention to. Yay. So that's the update there. Look for these calling cards and word clouds at the end of every art share. There will be 18 art share performances in 6 different categories, and one is going to come up right after Kristina Wong. Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Debórah. It's so curious doing this work in these digital contexts. I am sitting in front of a very large screen where I am witnessing your chat, and also I'm witnessing us on a 30-second delay, which is a little distracting. It's just been really amazing to see all of your words. It is such a gigantic pleasure to welcome Kristina Wong to our stage. Would you please give her a loud round of applause in the chat? But just say shout out to Kristina Wong, and let's welcome Kristina Wong to the stage.
Woohoo! Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much to my dear friend Claudia, Alick, FoolsFURY, and all the folks putting on today's Build From Here convening, for having me as your keynote speaker. I would first like to acknowledge that I offer these remarks from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino, Tongva, Chumash, and Kif people. Colleagues, you could have had so many speakers address you in the end times, in the last theater conference on Earth, and you chose me. And I don't take it lightly that you believe that I can offer some words of wisdom of how do we build from here. And what is that here anyway? Is it our physical here, our living rooms, which have now become our home offices, our child's classroom, our conference center, and Zoom theater? Is here this moment in history? Is here this complete reckoning of race and power we sit inside of? Is here a pause or reset button? Is here the moment we contemplate the hamster wheels that we've previously been producing theater on? And what the heck is the role of theater now in the here? And when we do return from here, how do we do it in ways that are more just, more equitable? And how do we flip the paradigm of white supremacy and structural inequity built into theater funding and organizations if we can't even get haircuts? These used to be bangs. BTW. So I am going to attempt to address all of this, and for this invitation to share my thoughts to a remarkable group of colleagues while still wearing my house slippers, I am so grateful. Now, friends, some of you may know me as Kristina Wong, the performance artist. Some of you have no idea who I am because I am a performance artist. The set you are seeing me against right now started as a project 3 years ago, where I decided that I would run for public office and create a show/rally about the experience that would tour alongside the real life rallies and crowded debates that we would be witnessing as we head into November's election. So you see, a certain election 4 years ago, November 2016, had me trying to figure out what to do with my voice as a once wacky and subversive artist whose signature was blurring real life with hysterical spectacles to comment on the absurdity of the world. But after November 2016, the wacky art that said, look how crazy the world is, just didn't seem to cut it, because politicians and artists seem to have switched jobs. They now create the shock and spectacle that have us questioning reality. We now reclaim the quiet space for social change and truth. So if politicians were going to take my job of being a reckless, durational performance artist, then I would take their jobs from them. So as part of this project I'm in, Kristina Wong for public office, I researched what it takes to run a compelling campaign for public office. And as it turns out, running for public office is not too different than making theater. Instead of a 5-act structure, you have a public narrative. You communicate your story via symbolic gestures, usually handshakes with desired constituent groups. And instead of script writing, you finely tailor stories about your hard scrabble upbringing and what you learned on your road to being a leader. Instead of a musical score, you devise crowd chants. You turn your followers into a Greek chorus that backs you up with slogans and talking points. Instead of marketing to an audience, you are waving down people to vote for you. And fundraising, so much fundraising. And election day is the final scene where you find out if you are likable enough to be picked up to go to series or if you'll just be another failed pilot. I ran in 2 elections last year. The first one was for a local delegate seat for the Democratic Party. That one I lost. But last April, with 71 votes, not including the vote that I cast for myself, I became a real-life elected official of Subdistrict 5, Wilshire Center, Koreatown Neighborhood Council. And now my power across the United States of America is as infinite as it is unpaid. That's right, my elected office is so powerful, it is completely volunteer. See, being a politician is just like being a theater maker. One of the biggest achievements as an elected rep came last year when I led my neighborhood council in a vote to abolish ICE. As it turns out, the vote was largely symbolic because local government can't actually abolish a federal agency. What I'm learning, though, is that politicians and artists have a lot in common. Artists make symbols until they become real life, and so do politicians. They sometimes offer that one lone dissenting vote to make a statement. And a question that I find myself wrestling with, especially in neighborhood council meetings that go on as long as 4 hours with no intermission, with very little forward moving plot, i.e. actual policy change that seems to help anybody, is do I actually have more impact on the world as an artist or a politician? Do I actually think I can fix the system by becoming the system? So this set that you see behind me is one that I designed and I sewed on this Hello Kitty sewing machine. Now, Kristina Wong for public office, the campaign rally show, was supposed to be the most relevant, timely show of my career. I already had a whole national tour lined up, and all too familiar to those of us in theater, my plans were cut short. My last live show was in Sacramento on March 13th for American River Community College. 20 minutes before the end of my show, the students got a text that the campus would be going online the next day. And suddenly, the last 3 years of developing this timely piece were flushed down the drain. And as was all my income, ostensibly for the rest of the year. But if it's one thing, being a local politician who's had to win over 72 votes, if you include the vote that I cast for myself, has taught me, it is to pretend like I know what I'm doing and that I'm in charge, even if I have no idea what I'm doing. Or maybe I learned this as an actor. If you act the role enough of a confident person who has control of the situation, soon you just become that character off stage. Whatever taught me this, I decided that panic would not serve me. And instead, with no income, no work lined up, living inside a real-life Steven Soderbergh Contagion movie that BTW we are all still in, I decided that the only way to stop the panic spiral would be to leverage my privilege to help others. If anything, to remind myself that with seemingly no power, I could still do powerful things. So I started sewing cloth face masks for frontline workers who had no protective personal equipment in March. The same skills that sewed these sets, that used to sew ruffles into fabric labia in my giant vagina costumes, was now making medical equipment. No craft store, not even fucking Joann's fabric and craft stores was prepared for the 2020 homesteading movement that was sewing cloth face masks to stop the spread of COVID-19. Every vendor in the country was back ordered on elastic and fabric, and what few factory made masks were out of stock for weeks. I was like Robinson Crusoe on my deserted island, which was sheltering here in my home in Koreatown, waving down every hobbyist seamstress on Facebook for leads on elastic. Sewers, who were not coincidentally mostly women of color, were chopping the straps off their bras. They were sawing the elastic off their fitted bed sheets. They were hand crocheting I-cord from scraps of yarn. No t-shirt was safe. No half-finished quilt project too precious to be sacrificed into DIY personal protective equipment. Needing help with what was becoming an overwhelming list of strangers who needed masks from me, I created a Facebook group called the Auntie Sewing Squad to find other people to help me sew, not realizing until a week later that our acronym was ASS. But our team of aunties are college professors, costume designers, screenwriters, scientists, published authors, actors, healthcare workers, retirees, teachers, students, award-winning artists and filmmakers, labor organizers, graphic designers, lawyers, and all over badasses. Our youngest auntie is 8, while our eldest is 93, and we are all juggling families, careers, and our own losses from COVID-19 in addition to this sewing labor. In the early days of the pandemic, because this shit has been going on so long that I can separate it into eras, I was running in and out of my home 10 times a day with fistfuls of elastic to meet a masked stranger that I had given my address to on the internet because they had offered to help sew. I was buying out dress shops of their elastic in cash, then immediately mailing spools away to other strangers in other cities, even if the postage was more than the spool itself. Some of these strangers became the aunties in our group. Others have taken the leap of faith. I had to take the leap of faith. We're going to make good on their promises to sew and weren't going to just sell masks on Etsy. When my first volunteers to step forward were mostly Chinese and Asian American women, I thought, I am becoming the overlord of a Chinese sweatshop. It wasn't hard to see the irony of college-educated Asian American women whose parents and grandparents did invisible, back-breaking garment labor to pay their debt to the American dream, now performing that same work all over again as some sort of ancestral destiny, this time for no pay, with far less appreciation of the time and skill that sewing requires, as we have become a country Amazon primed for instant satisfaction without consideration for the workers who make our things. And because so much of American manufacturing had moved to China, here we were, diasporic Asians trying to put together an ad hoc assembly line while working remotely from our home sewing machines. The thinking was, when the factory-made masks kick in, we're just gonna retire because there'll be so many masks on the market. But what I didn't realize was that after weeks of sewing furiously, scavenging for every last bit of elastic in Los Angeles to cover frontline workers with masks, that there would still be tens of thousands of people in America who can't access cheap factory-made masks. Communities that have long since been forgotten by the federal government. Before all this, we're now getting hit extra hard by the pandemic. Farm workers, indigenous communities, undocumented immigrants, unhoused folks, Black and brown communities, and incarcerated populations. Never did I imagine that I would pull my mother and her friends out of retirement to order them around my remote sweatshop. Never did I imagine that I would be politicizing the word sweatshop to point to the failure of the federal government in preparing us for this crisis. Never did I imagine how politically polarizing mask wearing would become. Never did I imagine how political the act of sewing 2 pieces of fabric together for a total stranger could be. And never did I imagine how many aunties from all over North America would rage stitch with us. And never did I plan for us to still be sewing 6 months later, today, that we would be a college class at San Francisco State, that we'd have a book deal, that we'd be on Good Morning America, or have our work extend to become 5 relief supply vans to the Navajo Nation, in addition to medical supply relief work that we do at Standing Rock, other indigenous communities, and last week, 2 farm workers affected by the California fires. But here we are, here, a moment where not only performance artists can become politicians, but also run a hospital supply factory out of her home in Koreatown, Los Angeles. We're in a here, where the heroes aren't the titans of industry or fancy actors who found mainstream acclaim, but grocery workers, postal workers, and the undocumented immigrants who work with no healthcare protections to keep our supply food chain going. In this upside down here, a lot is revealed. And if anything, this is a moment where we cut past all the bullshit and we get really clear about what world we want now and the world we want to re-enter into. And we do this all the time as artists. We make the invisible visible. Now we just have to do it in real life, not on stages. Not just because we can't go onto stages now, but because the world off stage needs our vision here and now. What the last few months has taught me is that for a lot of us in theater, we've been training for this moment. If you've ever looked at the landscape of what theater work was available to you and saw that because of your race and gender, you had that many fewer opportunities than your white male counterparts, and you went for it anyway, you have been training for here. If any of you have played to only 3 audience members, and not because you were making some kind of cool conceptual intimate experience, but because only 3 people showed up for your show, you have been training for here. If you have rehearsed mentally and prepared for this big engagement only to find that you were actually being presented in a cafeteria with one workable light and almost no tech time, and you did the show anyway, you have been training for here. If you're marginalized and you've made theater happen with the scraps that we've been thrown from white American theater and still found ways to take root and grow, you have been training for here. Now, I really resisted doing Zoom theater for months, and I'm not telling anybody to make Zoom theater, as it's not ideal, it's not anyone's first choice, and you will know what you're most called to do. But for me, I wanted to get people out to vote. And while I can't rally them in person, I figured, fuck, if I'm able to create a national network of aunties who can create a shadow government aid agency that has gotten masks on the most vulnerable of faces, I guess I can still bring my vision to my audiences from quarantine. So I have pivoted my show, Kristina Wong, for public office from my living room. I want to see everybody. So that is my kitchen. That was once the area above my loft. I've had to rework blocking around my dining table. I have spike marks on my floor. This is my Steadicam. It's an office chair with 2 tubs that I move around. Some audience members have told me that seeing my dirty dishes in my sink during the show makes the performance experience more intimate. I'll take it, sure. So what have I learned in the here is that there is no government. Leadership has failed us, and the systems that framed our survival for so long are slow to change and are built on the foundations of white supremacy and structural racism. The good news. What is the good news? The rapture is still playing out slower than it does in the movies. Culture, you know, that thing that we make. It actually has the power to organize faster than government change. And we actually may be here outside of theater spaces for a while and working away from each other, but we also have time and an amazing opportunity to try things that we've never done before and envision what this here is that we want to be in and continue to return to. And we can make those worlds happen everywhere, just not the stage. So thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best in health and art and sanity. And always, please, nourish yourself first.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Debórah.
Yeah.